Most Americans have eaten peanut butter their whole lives without ever flipping the jar over, and the jars sitting in the most kitchens are the ones you should read first. Here's what most people never find out. The two best-selling peanut butters in the country don't just contain peanuts. They contain fully hydrogenated vegetable oil and added sugar, blended in to fake a texture real peanuts never had. The #1 brand in America was pulled from shelves in a salmonella outbreak, and the strain that made people sick matched a sample found in that same plant 12 years earlier. 9 brands to put back, 3 that are actually just peanuts. We'll go from the lower concerns down to the worst offender, the most trusted name in the aisle. Every fact in this video comes directly from the ingredient label, federal recall records, and the company's own filings. Let's get into it. Number 9. Adams 100% natural peanut butter. The jar with the layer of oil floating on top. The one your family bought because it looked like the honest choice in a sea of processed spreads. And a lot of that reputation is earned. Flip Adams over, and the ingredient list is short. Peanuts, sometimes a little salt. No hydrogenated oil, no added sugar, no palm oil. That part is real, and it's the reason this brand sits at the bottom of the list instead of the top. But the full picture has a gap. Adams presents itself as the small, independent, West Coast natural brand it was for most of the last century. It isn't anymore. Adams has been owned by the J.M. Smucker Company since the late 1990s, the same corporation that owns the brand, sitting at #1 on this list. The indie natural label and the industrial giant behind the worst offender are the same company. J.M. Smucker runs one of the largest grocery portfolios in the country, and it owns the honest-looking jar and the recalled one at the very same time. There is a second issue, and it's specific to natural peanut butter made from conventional peanuts. Peanuts are one of the crops most prone to aflatoxin, a mold byproduct the International Agency for Research on Cancer classifies as a Group 1 carcinogen, the same category as tobacco, directly linked to liver cancer. Stir the oil back in and smell it. If there is a sharp paint-like note under the roast, that's rancidity setting in, and a jar left on a warm shelf for months is exactly where both problems accelerate. For an older adult managing liver or kidney function, that matters more than the clean label suggests. Adams is genuinely one of the better jars here. It's just not the independent brand the packaging still implies, and it gets more processed from here. Number 8. Maranatha Natural Peanut Butter. The earth tone jar in the organic aisle at Whole Foods and Sprouts, positioned for the shopper who already stopped buying the big names and pays more to avoid them. Maranatha built its whole identity on the word natural. The ingredient panel is where that word starts doing more work than it should. The no-stir versions, the ones marketed as more convenient, hold that smooth, never-separating texture because palm oil is blended in to keep it there. Real peanut butter separates. When it doesn't, something was added to stop it. And here, that something is palm oil, a saturated fat that has no business being in a jar labeled as just peanuts. Then there's the safety record. In 2014, Heinz Celestial, Maranatha's parent company, recalled dozens of production lots of Maranatha peanut and almond butter after federal testing linked them to a salmonella outbreak. The same recall pulled the private label nut butters that plant made for Whole Foods, Trader Joe's, Kroger, and Safeway. One facility, one contamination event, a dozen trusted store labels. The recall reached the shelves of the exact stores people trust the most to have already checked, which is the whole reason those shoppers stopped reading labels in the first place. Open a no-stir jar and drag a spoon through it. It's uniform, glossy, almost whipped. That consistency is the palm oil, not the peanut. For anyone watching saturated fat, because of cholesterol or a statin prescription, The added palm oil quietly works against the exact thing that prescription is managing. And for an older immune system, a salmonella exposure isn't a bad afternoon. It's a hospital risk. Maranatha reads as the clean organic option. The no-stir texture and the recall history tell a more complicated story than the label does. The next one hides its sugar behind a fun, friendly jar. Number 7. Peanut Butter and Company. The colorful jars with names like Dark Chocolate Dreams and White Chocolate Wonderful, the brand that turned peanut butter into dessert and made it feel playful and harmless. That's exactly the problem. Flip one of these jars over, and the second or third ingredient, sometimes higher, is sugar. And in the flavored varieties, there's a lot of it. This is a spread that started as peanuts and got engineered into candy that happens to come in a peanut butter jar. Some varieties carry 10 grams of added sugar or more in a 2-tablespoon serving, which is roughly what you'd get spooning table sugar straight onto a sandwich. The flavored lines also fold in palm oil and cocoa processed with additional additives to hold the flavor and texture together. Spread it and taste it slowly. The sweetness arrives first before any peanut flavor, and it clings to your teeth the way a candy bar does, not the way real peanut butter does. That's the sugar and the added oil coating your mouth. For anyone managing type 2 diabetes or watching an A1C number, this is one of the fastest ways to spike blood sugar while believing you're eating a protein. And because it's filed in everyone's head as peanut butter, not candy, nobody counts it. So, it becomes a daily hidden sugar source the person managing their blood sugar never thinks to question. The marketing frames it as a wholesome peanut butter with a fun twist. What's actually in the jar is a confection. A parent buying it for a child, or an older adult who grew up trusting that peanut butter was a health food, is getting a dessert with a health food's reputation. The next brand does the same thing while wearing the language of wellness. Number 6. Justin's Classic Peanut Butter. The squeeze packs at the checkout, the minimalist label, the brand that lives in the wellness section and gets tossed in the cart at Whole Foods without a second look. Justin's sells a feeling, small batch, better for you, a founder with a story. Here's what's behind that feeling. Justin's was acquired by Hormel Foods in 2016 for $286 million. Hormel is the corporation behind Spam. The independent wellness brand you reached for to get away from big food is owned by one of the largest processed meat companies in the country. That's the ownership. Now the panel, Justin's Classic, lists dry roasted peanuts and palm oil. Palm oil, again, in a product people specifically choose because they believe it's cleaner than the supermarket brands. The honey varieties add honey and sugar on top of that. Read the squeeze pack. Palm oil sits right there near the top, in the product positioned as the premium natural choice. Drag it across bread. It's silky and it never separates. And that stability is exactly what the palm oil is doing. For an older adult managing cholesterol, palm oil's saturated fat load runs directly against the reason they left the cheaper brands behind. And the added sugar in the flavored versions does the same thing to blood glucose. The premium price and the minimalist design imply purity. The ingredient list and the parent company tell you you're paying a wellness markup for palm oil, sugar, and a brand owned by the makers of Spam. You're paying 2 or 3 times the price of a plain jar for the privilege, and that premium buys you a founder story and a tropical oil, not a cleaner ingredient list. The next one doesn't even hide behind a story. It just prints the word natural and hopes you stop reading there. Number 5. Smucker's Natural Peanut Butter. The jar that puts the word natural right on the front and counts on that single word to end the conversation. For a lot of shoppers, it does. Flip it over. Smucker's Natural is not just peanuts. It contains added sugar and palm oil blended into a product whose entire pitch is that it's the simple, honest version. Natural is not a regulated term on a peanut butter label in any meaningful way. A company can print it on a jar that contains sugar and tropical oil and break no rule at all. That's the gap this brand lives in. And the company printing it is the J.M. Smucker Company, the same corporation that owns the #1 brand on this list and the #9 brand at the bottom. 3 separate jars, 3 different levels of trust, 1 procurement operation deciding what goes in all of them. The heritage name at the bottom, the natural jar in the middle, and the recalled red label at the top. All answer to the same corporate cost sheet. Taste it against a jar that's genuinely just peanuts, and the difference is immediate. There's a sweet edge that real peanut butter doesn't have, and a smoothness the sugar and palm oil are producing. If this breakdown is helping you shop smarter, a quick like genuinely helps more people find it, because the last 4 are the biggest names in the aisle and the ones most likely to be in your kitchen right now. For someone managing blood sugar, a spread they chose because it said, "Natural is quietly adding sugar to every sandwich." The word on the front was the marketing. The sugar and palm oil in the panel are the product. The next one is the cheapest jar on the shelf, and its history is worse than its price. Number 4. Great Value Peanut Butter. The Walmart jar sitting right beside the name brands. Same size, same creamy promise, half the price. Great Value doesn't need its own story. It borrows the credibility of every branded jar next to it. The proximity is the pitch. Here's what the low price is actually resting on. Great value. Peanut butter is made with hydrogenated vegetable oil and added sugar. The same industrial formula as the premium names, just cheaper. But the more serious part of this brand story is its history. In 2007, a salmonella outbreak was traced to a peanut butter plant in Sylvester, Georgia. That plant didn't only make Peter Pan, it also produced the Great Value peanut butter sold at Walmart. The outbreak sickened hundreds of people across dozens of states, and both labels were pulled in the same recall. Same plant, same contamination, 2 different jars on 2 different shelves. The people most likely to be feeding a family on that jar are the ones who could least afford a hospital bill from it, and they're the ones the cheapest formula and the thinnest safety margin land on hardest. Open it and run a knife through. It's unnaturally smooth, and it will stay that way for a year, because hydrogenated oil is holding it together, and there's a sweet finish that real peanuts don't leave. For a family shopping on a budget, choosing the affordable option isn't indifference, it's arithmetic, and that's exactly who ends up most exposed to the industrial formula and the weaker safety record behind the lowest price. The savings are real. What's behind the savings is the same hydrogenated oil and added sugar as the expensive brands, made in a supply chain with a documented outbreak in its past. The next 3 are the biggest names in America, and the concerns get more specific from here. Number 3. Peter Pan Peanut Butter. The friendly cartoon jar that's been in American pantries for a century, the one a lot of people grew up on without ever questioning. That familiarity is exactly why its record matters. In early 2007, the FDA warned Americans to stop eating Peter Pan peanut butter. A salmonella outbreak traced to the Sylvester, Georgia plant sickened at least 628 people across 41 states over roughly 9 months. It wasn't a freak accident. Years later, the manufacturer, then ConAgra, pleaded guilty to a federal criminal charge and paid $11.2 million. At the time, the largest penalty ever paid in a food safety case, after evidence showed shipments continued from that plant even after tests had flagged contamination. That's not interpretation. It's the court record. Peter Pan didn't disappear. The brand was sold, and it's now owned by Post Holdings, the packaged food conglomerate behind much of the cereal aisle, and co-manufactured by one of its affiliates. The friendly face on the label never changed through any of it, which is exactly how a brand with a criminal food safety record keeps its spot in the pantry across generations. Flip a current jar, and you'll still find hydrogenated oil and added sugar in the standard version. Open it, and the texture is uniform and aerated, engineered for spreadability, nothing like ground peanuts. For an older adult, a child, or anyone with a compromised immune system, salmonella isn't a stomachache. It's the demographic that ends up hospitalized. The cartoon and the 100-year history communicate safety and nostalgia. The federal case behind this brand is one of the most serious in the history of American peanut butter, and most people eating it have never heard a word of it. The next two are the two best-selling jars in the country. Number 2, Skippy Peanut Butter, the second best-selling peanut butter in America, in nearly 1 out of every 5 peanut butter jars sold in the country. For millions of households, Skippy simply is what peanut butter tastes like. That's what makes the ingredient list worth reading. Flip the classic jar over. After peanuts, you'll find hydrogenated vegetable oil, a blend that has historically included cottonseed, soybean, and rapeseed oil, plus added sugar and salt. Peanuts and a little salt make peanut butter. Everything else in that jar is there to fake a shelf life and a smoothness that real peanuts don't naturally hold. Then there's the owner. Skippy is owned by Hormel Foods, the same company that makes Spam, which bought the brand in 2013. The all-American lunchbox staple is a product line inside a processed meat corporation. The same company that engineers shelf-stable canned meat is engineering the shelf stability of your peanut butter, and it does it the same way, with industrial oils and added sugar standing in for what real peanuts can't fake. Take a knife and cut straight down through the jar. It stays perfectly smooth, no oil separation, no movement, month after month on a warm shelf. That stability is the hydrogenated oil doing its job. The finish is noticeably sweet, and that's the added sugar. For anyone managing type 2 diabetes, that sugar turns a protein into a blood sugar event. And for anyone watching heart health, the industrial oils are the opposite of what peanuts alone would give them. Skippy has the trust of 3 generations and the ingredient list of a processed food product. The gap between what people assume is in that jar and what's actually printed on the back is the whole point of this list. And it's widest of all on the single most trusted name in America, the one at number 1. Number 1, Jif Peanut Butter, the best-selling peanut butter in America. In roughly 1 of every 3 jars sold, the red label that's been the default choice in more kitchens than any other brand in the country. When something is trusted this completely, it stops getting red. That's exactly why it belongs at number 1. Start with the panel. Jif's standard creamy is peanuts, sugar, molasses, and fully hydrogenated vegetable oils. The most trusted peanut butter in America is sweetened and stabilized with the same industrial oils as every other jar on this list, wrapped in the label people trust the most. But the label isn't the worst of it. In May of 2022, the J.M. Smucker Company recalled Jif peanut butter across the country after a salmonella outbreak. Here's the part that should stop you. When investigators sequenced the outbreak strain, it matched an environmental sample collected from that same Lexington, Kentucky plant. Back in 2010, the same strain had been living in the facility for roughly 12 years before it made people sick. That's not a one-time slip. That's a plant. Open a jar of Jif, and it's flawlessly smooth and distinctly sweet. And now you know both of those things were added. For an older adult, for a child, for anyone immune-compromised, that recall wasn't theoretical. People were hospitalized. This is the number 1 jar in the country, and that's the safety record. sitting behind it. J.M. Smucker earns billions a year. Removing the hydrogenated oil and the sugar wouldn't meaningfully change the cost. The formula and the safety record are choices, protected by a level of trust strong enough that most people never read the jar. The biggest name of all is the one with the most in the jar that shouldn't be there. Now that you know what to put back, here are the 3 that are actually just peanuts. Best option number 3. Teddy All-Natural Peanut Butter. The accessible everyday pick, the one you can actually find and afford, sold at regular supermarkets, not just specialty stores. Teddy is made by a family-owned company in Massachusetts that has been grinding peanuts since the 1920s, and the ingredient list reflects it. Peanuts, that's it. Or peanuts and salt, if you choose the salted version. No hydrogenated oil, no palm oil, no added sugar, nothing engineered in to fake the texture. We're not here to hand you a new label to trust blindly. These are conventional peanuts, so aflatoxin is still worth respecting, which means buy it fresh, and once it's open, keep it in the refrigerator. That's not a downside. It's what a product with nothing added to preserve it is supposed to do. But that's the trade of real food. It behaves like food. Open a jar, and there's a layer of oil sitting on top, and that's the point. Real peanut butter separates because there's nothing in it holding the oil in place. Stir it back in, and the aroma is roasted peanuts and nothing else. No sweet edge, no waxy coat on your tongue. For an older adult managing blood sugar or cholesterol, this is a spread that's actually just protein and fat from peanuts, doing none of the quiet damage the Avoid list does. Widely available, honestly priced, and exactly what it says it is. Best option number 2, Santa Cruz Organic Peanut Butter. And here's a distinction that's the entire point. Santa Cruz Organic is owned by the J.M. Smucker Company, the same corporation behind the #1 brand on the Avoid list. Same parent, completely different product. That a single company can own both the worst jar on this list and one of the best tells you the formula was always a choice. The ingredient panel reads organic, dry roasted peanuts, and a little salt. That's the complete list. No sugar, no palm oil, no hydrogenated anything. The peanuts are USDA certified organic, which means they are grown without the synthetic pesticides, including glyphosate, that show up in conventional peanut crops. That single certification closes a gap most of the Avoid brands leave wide open, and you're getting that organic sourcing at a grocery store price, not a specialty store markup. We'll be honest about the caveat. Organic doesn't erase aflatoxin, so the same rule applies. Buy it fresh and refrigerate after opening. Open a jar, and the oil has separated the way it's supposed to, and the roast is deeper. Because these are dark roasted peanuts. Stir it in, and it tastes like peanuts and salt. Full stop. For anyone who wants the cleaner sourcing of organic without hunting through specialty stores, this is sitting in most major grocery chains. Same company as #1. A world apart in the jar. Best option number 1. Crazy Richard's 100% Peanuts, the most transparent jar in the entire category, and the name tells you exactly why. Crazy Richard's is one ingredient. Peanuts. Not peanuts and salt, not peanuts and a little oil. Just peanuts, about 540 of them, ground into every jar, and nothing else. The brand publishes exactly what it is. It is non-GMO project verified. The peanuts are grown in the United States, and it is family-owned. There's no sugar to spike your blood sugar, no hydrogenated oil, no palm oil, and no salt, which matters directly for anyone managing blood pressure. This is the jar that asks you to trust nothing and verify everything, because there's only one thing in it to check. Open it, and the oil is pooled on top, thick and slow when you stir it, and the smell is pure roasted peanut. Taste it, and it's exactly one flavor. peanuts, because that's the whole recipe. The only caveat is the same honest one. Conventional peanuts still carry the aflatoxin consideration, so buy it fresh and keep it cold once it's open. If you take one thing from this video, it's this jar. Here's what this whole aisle comes down to. Peanut butter should be peanuts. That's the entire product. But the most trusted names in America, the jars in the most kitchens, quietly added fully hydrogenated oil to fake the texture, palm oil to stop the separation, and sugar to make a protein taste like dessert. And the two biggest brands of all carry the two most serious safety records on the shelf. None of that was necessary. The 3 jars that got it right prove it was always a choice. 9 jars kept the additives, and the biggest names kept the safety failures too, because trust did the selling for them, and almost nobody ever turned the jar over to check. So here's what to actually do standing in that aisle. First, flip the jar over and read the oil line. If you see the words hydrogenated or palm oil, put it back. Peanuts don't need either one, and they never did. Second, look for added sugar or molasses in a product that only needed peanuts. If a peanut butter has to be sweetened, ask what it's covering for. Third, remember that the real ones separate. A layer of oil on top isn't a defect. It's the sign that nothing was added to hold it in place. The brands fighting that separation are fighting it with something you'd rather not be eating. And fourth, at home, if a natural jar has been sitting warm for months and smells sharp or paint-like, that's rancidity. So buy what you'll actually finish and refrigerate it once it's open. Teddy, Santa Cruz Organic, and Crazy Richards all say exactly what they are, and all 3 remove the things the other 9 chose to leave in. The labels on those 9 jars haven't changed. The research behind these concerns isn't new. What changes now is what you know when you're standing in front of that shelf. The trusted name and the honest jar cost about the same, and now you can tell them apart in the time it takes to flip one over. You don't need a lab or a subscription to do any of this. You need 10 seconds and the back of the jar. If this changed how you see that aisle, share it with someone who still reaches for the trusted red jar on autopilot because they've never been given a reason to turn it over. Now you know what to actually look for